So your content was largely, this is how you set, this is how you create, and this is how you achieve your goals.
Yes. A lot of people have 3-month journals, but we were the first ones to do it. It was like having something people had to buy more frequently. Another thing was
so good.
Having people find success with the product. Because if you can sell it once, how do you get people to come back? That was creating content, creating resources, creating frameworks. Because a lot of people, they don't learn how to set goals or even what they should be doing. So we put a lot of time and effort into how do we create so that they know exactly what they have to do when they get this to be successful. Because if they are successful, they'll come back and they're going to buy.
Welcome to the Jasmine Star Show, a place that we talk about life, business, mindset, and today, your best self. I have to tell you that in preparation of this conversation, I have done a deep dive in what it takes to build an e-com business. Stuff that's like very interesting to me when people are like, Jasmine, what's your hobby? And I'm like, I just look at businesses. I just look at business models. That is what I do in my free time. My husband and I are co-founders. We go to restaurants, we count tables, we see how many chairs are, we see the average turnaround. We're looking at price, profitability, what we would change, the pricing structure. We are sick. And you want to know what? I knew that the minute I met Kat, she too understood the language that I speak. She has built a business. She has sold a business. She has bought a business. And somehow all of those things are interconnected. And her story is going to empower you to think about business in a different way, but also to think about how you pursue your best self. On that note, Kat, welcome to the Jasmine Star Show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so happy you are here. Now, I normally stay away from podcasting where I'm like, tell us your origin story. Because somebody who's listening, I think that they deserve our absolute best. And when I hear your story, what I hear is a pure story of grit, stamina, strategy, resilience, coming back, next time, best time. It's like I hear all of these things and I'm like, we could pick up the story anywhere in the story. I think that there's so many juicy parts to it. And I look at your story and I look at it kind of like in 4 sections. Now, I know that there's so many iterations of it, but I think about the fundraising part of it. I'm not going to spill any details. I want you to like run at this because it's so fascinating to me. We have the fundraising, we have the build, we have the sell, we have a new chapter. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, do we start at the beginning, which is not anywhere where I start, but I think it's freaking fascinating. Do we start where we are now and then freaking work backwards? You tell me the greatest value. Someone's like, I'm not sure this podcast is going to be for me. I don't do e-com. The show is not about e-com, y'all. The show is about 1,000 different things. I'm so fascinated. Where do we go and say, you want to watch, you want to listen, you want to watch this show? Where are we at in your story?
So let's go back to the beginning, because I think anyone watching this who's starting a business has started a business. And a lot of times we like see people on podcasts like this and you're like, oh, they're so far ahead of me. Like, how do I get there?
Good.
And before I started my first business, I never read a business book. And so I never took a business class. I was an architect and I knew how to like make stuff, but I didn't know how to sell stuff. In fact, it was like almost successful in spite of not being able to sell. Like I hated selling. And so I wouldn't even email my list unless I had something new to show them. And then I had to pay someone just to send emails because I'm like, look, I can't do it. And then I started BestSelf when we launched with crowdfunding. So it's like, here's a product. I think people will love it. I also didn't have the money to buy a bunch and try to see if it sold. So crowdfunding is a great way to fundraise for making something exist and seeing if people actually want it, because people can say that they want it, but if they open their wallet and actually give you money.
Okay, this is the part that I found fascinating. So if we take it, I'm also a storyteller. So it's like you and I are actually meeting in person for the first time, but it's like in the story of my mind, what I see is somebody who has a skill set and has an idea. And the world in which I come, it's like just brute force. I'm just going to break down every wall and every door. And I think that I sometimes picture, well, she's an architect. She thinks about everything from all sides. She thinks about foundations. She thinks about the build. And so what you did is you said, I have this idea. And we'll talk about that idea and where you got that idea, but I'm going to take it to crowdsource. And if people buy it before I've spent a penny, then I know it's proof of concept. Then the risk is really the risk of an idea.
Yeah.
So what is the idea that you come up with? And then when you crowdfund, what are the results?
Yeah. So I had my previous business, I'd learned how to do crowdfunding. A friend taught me. He was just like, why don't you crowdfund? Because I used to just make a product and then sell it on my site. And he was like, you should crowdfund it. So I set up my first crowdfunding 2 weeks later. And then I ran a couple for a previous business. And then I figured out like, okay, here's the kind of system of how to do it. But let me.
Okay. Whoa. You are not going to come on this podcast and not talk to me about the system. Somebody's listening and they're like, wow, I'm listening to Kat. I'm feeling inspired. I want to test an idea. What are 3 things that somebody who's setting up their crowdfunding, like what are the 3 things now that you know, like, you know, girl, you kind of killed the game. What are those things that you would recommend somebody?
So a lot of people think like, oh, I'll just set up a crowdfunding and people will come and buy. It's like you have to set up an email list just like you would for any other product launch. Kickstarter's not going to send traffic to you unless they know you're successful, because they want, and also if you get new people that have never been on their platform before, they're like, oh, they're basically like, the more people back a project, the more they're likely to back future projects. So they're basically customers of like Kickstarter, Indiegogo. So if you bring new people to their platform, they will reward you by giving you traffic. And so generally what I've seen with...
Okay, hold on. I'm going to break this down. If I'm crowdfunding a project and you're crowdfunding a project, I bring in, like, I tell my people, hey, come in and crowdfund buy this thing. And then since they come onto the platform, Indiegogo or any other crowdsourcing site can be like, hey, can you check out Kat's?
Yeah, so you're sending them to your site. So you're like, come to my party. And then there's other people at the party that they're like, oh, can you also back this project? Because once people are on the platform, they're more likely to buy another thing. So one of the first things is like building an email list of people that are going to be interested in your product. So for my product, became BestSelf, that list was grown like really like organically. It was like a giveaway for only products that people who'd be interested in our product would buy. So you're not trying to grow the biggest list ever. Like, oh, here's an iPad or a MacBook Pro. It's like, yeah, everyone wants that. But when you come to launch your thing, like nobody's going to care. So only like the weirdos that are going to like your product give other products that they would like.
Okay, let's break this down. What did you do?
So
you're
like
selling.
So we created the self journal, and it was a goal-based journal. Like we'll show you how to set a goal, break it down in 3 months. So it's a journal, and we're like bulletproof coffee, like productivity books, software that people who are only interested.
Good.
Software that only like type A people are going to be interested in. And so whenever we like send out the email, oh, we launched this. So it's like other problems being solved by other products that are around the circle of what it is we're trying to do.
Very cool. So number 1 was to build a newsletter list on the back of your crowdfunding project.
And then also to just have simple rewards, because here's what people do is like they set up a crowdfunding thing and they're like, okay, we have the main thing that's in the video. And then we have a t-shirt with our company name and a hat with our company name and like all this other bullshit that nobody actually wants. So what you're actually doing is people just want the thing and multiples of the thing. And so you have to have like a really simple structure of like the most discounted it's ever going to be. And like, so it's like 1 journal, 2 journals, 4 journals, 10 journals. And you're really just trying to because that's all people want. And so what you do when you try to complicate it is like, you're going to finish and you're like, God, I have to find a t-shirt manufacturer now that like nobody even wants, but they want to support you. And then also doing like $1 reward, because again, the crowdfunding people, like some people are not going to be into your journal, right? Which is fine, but they might want to support you. But if you put a reward with no actual like physical reward, people can back you. And then
like a donation.
Yeah. Well, not a donation. It's like $1. I support this project, but I don't want this journal.
Okay.
And so what Kickstarter is actually rewarding is the more people you get to your project, the better than the actual like money
because
raised.
it's acquisition for
and so if you understand like how do you make it a win for them, then you can also make it a win, and then you're getting the popular one, you're appearing on the website, they're showing you to other projects, and so if people back one, they're more likely to back another.
Okay, so what you did was you put out your project to test it, and then in order for you to test it, you were also building a newsletter list.
Yeah.
And then you had aligned incentives, because if people want a journal, they're not really there for a hat. And so you started driving incentives by you bundle and save. That seems like a very clear value add and gets your product more out to people. And then also finding a way for people to be a part of the project, even if they don't actually want the product itself. It's just like hey, I see you and this is something that I'm about. Okay, so crowdfunding tips from Kat. There you go. We're already starting with the value add. So somebody's looking and they're watching and they're hearing this and they're like, I can start doing this. But what happens in that gestation process? Like what happens in that iteration that kind of blows your mind and says like, oh, this is different than anything I've done before?
Because our goal is 15,000. We hit that in a day and a half.
Wow.
And then we raised like 322,000 in a month. And so
Oh my God.
So we basically sold over 10,000 units in the month. And so when we priced our rewards, we priced them based on like the MOQ, which I believe was like 1,000 units.
Okay.
And so that was enough money to like, we basically made 30,000 units. We pre-sold 10, and that was enough money to strategically like set up the company. So we never had to raise money again. And that is how I like tell people to think about crowdfunding. You like don't always have to go back there, but if you use it as like a launch pad of like, okay, I pre-sold this much, how do I make enough? Because you know the scale of economies, like especially with printing, it goes down the more you print.
Yeah.
And so it might have been like 50% less per unit because of the amount we did. And that's like strategically how you build a company that you don't have to keep going back there for.
Okay, so one last clarifying question. If I put out and I want to test my idea, do I want to set a big goal? Like you said 15,000. There's people who like, oh, my goal is 100,000.
I mean, my internal goal, actually my goal that I had written in the journal was 200,000. So my goal was 15, but you want to hit that quickly. And you also want to have that make sense to your goal. So like we're coming out with a journal, 15K makes sense. A guy I ran into at a party once, he's like, yeah, I tried to like launch Kickstarter and it didn't work out. And I was like, okay, what was it for? And he's like, a book. And I'm like, what was the goal? And he was like, 100,000. I'm like, yeah, no shit. If I had have set my goal at 100,000, like I wouldn't have gotten probably funded, because people go on there and they're like, oh, she's only like 20% to her goal. Even though they get their money back, there's like oh, I don't want to like back it until you want to back a winning horse. And so you become a winning horse, and then you start adding like bonuses on to the point where it's like, oh, a no-brainer, because you start adding in things.
Interesting. Yeah. That is such a big key takeaway, the psychology of the way that people are looking at funding. And so you funded not even your business, you funded the idea which launched into the business. And so, okay, so you raise over $300,000, and then what?
And then we're like, okay, now we have to figure out how to deliver these to customers. So it was just like manufacturing. And then every stage of business, it's like figuring out the problem. When you actually have sales, that's a good problem. It's like, okay, now how do I get us 3PL or, you know, a ship, like someone to actually ship it to customers that isn't me. And
were you doing that at all?
I did it with a previous business, but I like gave up. I was like, I cannot do this anymore.
Okay, good. Okay, so you set up this new venture entirely different. You knew you were going to do 3PL. Yeah. And so like, what kind of problems are you solving? Like, so people are saying, oh, cry me a river, Cat, you raised $300,000. You're like, but let's go back to like where you were. It's like, I have the money. Yeah. I know it's the idea. What logistical things are coming up for you?
Well, I mean, one of the things was like promising that stuff was going to be delivered by Christmas time. Oh. So if it's not, the campaign doesn't end until mid-September, like manufacturing, getting it on a ship, getting it to the US, and then shipping it to customers. We did get it for the US customers, but for like UK and Australia, it took like a few more weeks. Okay. So stuff like that, where it's like, look, how do we get this container so that it arrives earlier? So it's like disappointing people because you didn't know what to expect before you started. So that's always one thing I tell people is like, take the time that you think it's going to take and then add like double.
How did you deal with that for the people in the UK and Australia? They were disappointed that they didn't get it by Christmas. What did you?
I mean, I think we were just like, look, we were unreasonable with our expectations. I think it came maybe early January, if not like the first week in January. So it's like they could still start it pretty early, but it just didn't come before the 25th because like everyone in the world is trying to ship their stuff at the same time. Yeah. But getting it to the US people, we did manage. And so that was like a big...
Good. Okay. So when we go back to that like origin story and your building, what are some of like the pitfalls? Like if we go back to that, the look on your face, you're like, all the things.
I mean, so I launched the crowdfunding campaign in 2015. Mm-hmm. Then we launched the Shopify store January 1st, 2016. And I was like a workaholic, just hustling like constantly. I think it took us about 6 months to hire. So it's just like dealing with customer service, doing everything, which in some ways is good because you learn how to do everything. So like anyone that comes in, I'm like, I've done this. Yeah. Like I know what it takes sort of thing. But then it's just like, you don't have enough hours in the day. Yeah. And we were growing fast. But again, because I didn't...
How many people are you at, when you say we, at the time were you, what did...
Well, at the time, myself and my co-founder.
Okay.
It was the two of us. And then I think we hired a customer support person in like June of 2016.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was...
Okay.
Yeah. And just learning the stuff that one of us wasn't good at or
Yes.
both of us weren't good at, it's like, oh my God.
Right.
I think operationally, we could have used someone much earlier than we find someone, because entrepreneurs is like, we know a lot of entrepreneurs and we often try to hire our friends
Yes.
who are not operations people. And so it doesn't work out that well. So that's one thing, is like, we would look around and be like, who else can we hire that we know? Like, oh, we'll try to fit this
Yes.
square peg into a round hole of operations, when that's like
Yes.
not what they want to do at all, and not what they're good at, which should be fine. So we tried that for a while, and then I realized, like, it took me a few years of like doing things wrong to be like, oh yeah, this is how you hire better. But I also went through an embezzlement thing in 2020. I went through business partner breakup, and like, he kind of stepped out in 2018, but I didn't know anything about vesting. And so it was like 50% of the company like walked out the door. So then I spent 2 years dealing with
So
that.
it's 2016. It's June 2016, and you hire your first customer service person. But if I'm doing the math correctly, that was 6 months of you and your co-founder doing everything in the business.
Yeah.
Then in June of 2016, halfway through the year, you bring in your customer service person, and then a year and a half later, your co-founder says, peace out.
Yeah. So we won the Shopify Build a Business competition in August of 2016.
Now talk to me about that. What you do, apply for this? I don't know anything
So
about
Shopify did this really cool thing where they were like, how do we motivate people to find success with our platforms? They did this smart thing where they created a contest where it was like 6 different categories, and it was based on sales over over 2 months, some maximum thing. I forget the exact rules, but basically, so essentially the winners of that contest got to ring the New York Stock Exchange bell. They got to go to, go to the Gatsby Mansion with Tony Robbins and Tim Ferriss. So they were like, how do we create a prize that you can't buy with money that would entice people?
So good.
And actually the competition launched, like they announced it the day after our Kickstarter ended. And I was like, well, this is just fate. Like, we're definitely going to enter this. And what's funny is, with the previous business I had, I didn't even get close to it, but it was one of those things where I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool. So
Okay, one thing, I've never heard about this before, and I'm like, I want to do this competition. This sounds like freaking amazing, but hold on. So everybody on the Shopify platform is eligible.
Yeah, you have to enter it, but basically,
Okay.
if you're you had to be a new store within a
certain
year
amount
of
of time.
that,
Okay.
and with that under like $1 million in revenue when you started. I forget exactly.
So good.
So we started January 1st, and we hit like 2.3 million. And so we end up winning in one of our categories. And then we were invited by Tony to this like business mastery the next
Okay, did
year.
you just say Tony, like Tony Robbins?
Yeah.
Like we were just invited by Tony. Oh my God.
So then they
Okay.
announced the Build a Bigger Business, which is like a scaling one. They were like, okay, if you are over $1 million, how much do you scale in a year? And we end up winning that one as well in 2017, which we did not expect. And at the
So
time,
wait, you did 2.6 in year one,
2.3 in year one.
2.3 in year one, and then you do the scaling
So
competition.
like 6.8 or something like that.
Good Lord.
And it was just like mayhem. And we did hire people, obviously, but it was just like we didn't have a clue what we were doing.
So you have this like massive jump, and yes, you're hiring. And I want to talk about, let's talk about the prize of the second competition, because I know I'm going to get DMs and be like, well, we know that she got to be first.
Oh yeah,
to
so
Tony.
you got to go to Fiji to stay at Tony Robbins like resort, and like Tim Ferriss and Marie Forleo and Joe from Airbnb. So they had all these like mentors, and the great thing about the Gatsby Mansion was so close to New York that like the mentors would be there for a few hours. Damon John, I did play Monopoly with him for like 6 hours.
Okay.
Till like 2 a.m.
Please tell me you beat him. Please tell me you
No,
beat
but
him.
it was down to the two of us.
Okay.
And it was like 2 a.m. He literally had a car waiting outside for like 3 hours. And then
Oh my God, I love this story. I love this story.
and he like travels with his own Monopoly board. Like it's legit. And his like, I don't know if his bodyguard he was like the banker. And I swear the pictures of this guy, it was so funny. Anyway, but I ended up getting an affiliate deal with Damon after that Monopoly game. His manager was like, okay, he likes you. You should reach out.
That's the best freaking Monopoly game.
I know.
Oh my
So
God.
it's good that he won.
I know, exactly.
I won,
It's all
but
part of
he
your
won.
plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who really won? You.
So
oh my God.
and then the great thing about Fiji was that we're all like trapped on this island. So like
they couldn't come in and out.
yeah, so they're all just there. Like Tim is just like hanging out, and like Tony was still the one that was like this giant, but everyone else, like the mentors, really were like around you and
talking more than just like the hour session you had at the Gatsby Mansions. That was pretty cool.
Oh my God, I'm so fascinated by this story. Okay. See, this is, I didn't even know. I've done creeping on you and I didn't even know all of this stuff. So let's go back to the actual like storyline and logistics. And so by the end of 2016, how many team members do you have? The year that you do 2.3. And I ask you a question as you're drinking water. I'm sorry. I'm just so great at this.
God, 4 or 5. I don't remember.
Okay. And then the following year, as you guys scale, how big does the team become?
I mean, I think at the max the team was like 14 maybe.
Okay. And as you guys are growing, and I want to go back. Okay. I want to go 2 ways. And I want to say it out loud so I don't forget. One, I want to know what in the world were you doing for marketing to be growing in this degree? Because for all intents and purposes, I'm sure it's a phenomenal journal. It's a journal.
Right.
And so what the heck? And then the second part is the timeline of the departure of your co-founder, because I find it like just odd that with so much success. Like, so what was happening along there? So let's talk about marketing of the business.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things, our product is a 3-month based product. And so.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And that really was around the framework of how we look at goals. But it also made sense business-wise because we have to buy 4 times a year.
Okay, hold on. Pause, because I heard this before. This is so freaking fascinating. Most journals, planners, goal setting are in the context of 12 months. And you, like all of your competition, are looking at 90-day, 3-month goals. Except for the fact that your offer comes in a 3-month goal-setting journal where your competition is 12 months.
Right.
So you get to sell 4 products to 1. Cha-ching.
Yeah.
So good.
And
so good. Was that intentional? Were you guys like that strategic about it? Or
No.
it was, we're making a 3-month journal because we want you to hit your goals in 3 months?
yeah, I mean, I came up with the idea of like a 3-month journal because that's how I worked better. Because a year long, it's like, I mean, imagine setting a year-long goal in January of 2020.
Right.
It's like, like, oh yeah, we have a pandemic. But if you set it 3-month goal, March, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, actually,
All right. We got to switch. We got to change
Yeah.
some gears. Okay. Yeah.
And so that's just what worked for me. Also, because I have like ADHD and I have a year, I will wait until the last minute to do anything. And so for me, that's what worked. And now a lot of people have 3-month journals, but we were the first ones to do it. And so it's like, one of the things was like having something people had to buy more frequently. Another thing was
so good.
having people find success with the product. Because like if you can sell it once, how do you get people to come back? And so that was creating content, creating resources, creating frameworks. Because a lot of people, they don't like learn how to set goals or even what they should be doing. So we put a lot of time and effort into how do we create so that they know exactly what they have to do when they get this to be successful. Because if they are successful, they'll come back and they're going to buy.
So your content was largely, this is how you set, this is how you create, and this is how you achieve your goals.
Yeah.
So
and it's like,
just,
oh, you have a health goal. This is like 5 people that had health goals and exactly what they put in their journal every day. And so it's like, how do we minimize the amount of like thinking that people have to do?
So good.
So it's like,
Kat, so good.
yeah.
I keep on jumping in. No, it's just because I was raised in a church and you just talk back.
Yeah.
So I'm cutting you off. You think I'm cutting off, but I'm like, no, so good. I'll just repeat. You're like 3 journals, 3 months. Yes, 3. I'll just repeat back, but like, go. This is so good.
But I think at the end of 2017, so we had the journal and then we had some side products, but the journal was like 75% of our revenue in 2017, which I was just like, oh my God, this is stressful because it's one single point of failure.
Right.
And so one mistake we made is like, I went through a lot of like, I actually got divorced in 2017. And at the same time, we're like winning the Build a Bigger Business competition. So I'm in Fiji and all this like, I bumped into this guy and he's like, oh, everything's going amazing for you. Cause like social media will say that. I'm like, yeah, I'm actually going through a divorce, not a contentious one. Like we were still on good terms, but it was like a chapter of my life was ending. And it got me to this point where I was like, best self at that point had been like your type A, most productive self. But I'm like, oh, I'm like winning all these competitions. I'm like, it's not really that fun whenever you're like working all the time, but then you haven't paid attention to your like personal life. And so that kind of started me on a path of like, oh, I never want to like get divorced again or go through this relationship stuff. So let me figure out how do I have a good relationship. And so I kind of went down that path. And my old team used to joke like whatever best self will come up with is just like whatever Kat's dealing with. So originally I was like, I read all these personal development books. I'm like, I need to create a framework that I just know if I follow this, I'll get to my goal, which is what the journal with. And so then BestSelf, I'm like, I need to figure out like what should I be doing in a relationship to make sure like we're connected. And that became what led to like the intimacy deck, which became the top seller beyond the journal. So it was like, how do we, best self is not just like your most productive type A self. It's like, what does it mean for you? It's like a great relationship with your partner, with your kids, with your family. Also, you want to hit your goals. And so I think that's like where best self really started, is like when I went through this like period of, oh, actually, this is what this brand actually means. And I was only looking at it from this like tiny skewed view of like only in business. But I'm like, I hit all these business goals and then I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel good. Why not?
So beautiful. Can we pause and talk about the intimacy deck? And I'm going to go back. Girl, this noggin is large and in charge. I'm going to hit all those data points. But now we talk about the intimacy deck that is outsold the journal. And so I'm like, okay, what was that?
So it hasn't outsold the journal, but it's our new top selling product.
New top selling. Okay, thank you.
And it's a 150 deck prompt card. And I call it like a Trojan horse for therapy within couples that doesn't feel like therapy. It feels like a game.
So good.
And so it's like 6 different categories. We worked with relationship experts to come up with questions that would both strengthen your bond and then increase vulnerability, so you could actually talk about real things without having one person ask the question. Because here's the thing is like, it's like, I'm not asking that. Like the cards are asking, I should have brought some. I'm so mad.
Because I actually would be like, oh my God, I want to do one. Like my husband is here today and it would have been so awkward and I would have freaking loved it. Like asking us
I'm so mad at myself.
Oh my gosh. No, it's happening for a reason, because he's cringing off camera. I know he is. He's like, you want us to do
I'm going to deliver some
therapy?
to
A card therapy on our podcast. I live for that stuff. I love being uncomfortable, and I don't necessarily step into uncomfortable situations, but I also don't back down from a challenge. If you had brought them, girl,
Damn.
JD is like, thank God that those cards aren't here. I'm so fascinated with this. That's so beautiful. That's amazing.
So we came out with the intimacy deck. So it was basically like intimacy icebreakers and then little talk for you and your kids.
I saw that.
So
Little talk is fascinating because I'm picking up a deck for Luna.
I'm gonna send some
Thank
to your
you.
hotel.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm
oh,
so
to my
mad.
hotel. But dang, baby. See, and that's the thing. That's the difference. That is the difference of you. You said I'm gonna bring them to your hotel, and I was like, I'll make sure that they're mailed. No.
Yeah,
You get it done.
I already found out where
Shopify competition. I would have lost. Thanks. Thanks. Wow.
Yeah. So
Okay, talk to us. But talk to us about the what was it? The little ones deck.
the little talk.
Little talk. Yes.
So it's like big conversations for your kids, because a lot of times you're like, oh, how was your day? And
Yes.
it's like you get caught in I have a toddler, so we're not at that point. I still ask her, but
Yes.
there's not much conversation. And one thing that we were hearing from customers is like, okay, how do I have conversations with my kid in a way where they'll actually open up to me? And same way as like it's vulnerable to be like, ask your kid a question, because in their mind they're like, why are they asking me this? What does it mean?
Yes.
And when there's a card,
Yeah.
it's like the card's asking me, and so I can be much more open. And so it just like removes a lot of walls that would otherwise be there. And so we've gotten like a ton of,
That's beautiful.
and the deck started from, I was trying to sell this other product. And so I'm just like always working through like, oh, what's the objections when someone's journaling? I'm like, I see the
So you're creating ancillary, what I would call in the traditional digital marketing world, it would be bonus content for an objection refutal. And so if somebody is journaling and they get stuck, or they say, I won't buy a journal because I don't, and then that becomes the next offer, or in my world, it'd be a bonus, but for you, it'd be like an extension of the product suite.
Yeah, basically. Well, I was trying to sell this other product because I'm trying to teach people how to journal.
Okay.
And so this is the way my mind works. Is like, okay, how to get people to journaling, because they'll just write the same thing every day and they won't really get it. So it's like, okay, how do we give them a question to journal on? Oh, and then when you sell journals, everything's a journal, which I didn't want. I didn't want to be the journal company, which is what people were calling us. And so I was like, if you have a prompt in a journal, and I'm like, I don't feel like that prompt today. I don't want to write about that.
Okay.
And then I have to skip a page, and that's annoying me because I don't want to leave like a blank page that I might never want to answer. So I like really go deep.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, you know what would be
that makes
better?
you so good at product. Dang it, girl.
And I'm like, oh, but we better would be cards. And so the cards actually came from trying to sell another product. And those cards were like the Edison deck, which was like coming up with ideas, Wordsmith, which was journaling prompts. And so what happened was those sold really well. And then on a product call, we were like, you know what people do more than they journal is they have conversations. And so everything like spirals from somewhere, but the goal is
So
like, how
good.
you like
So good.
becoming a problem. So I talk about this like problem first company instead of a product first. So it's like not everything should be a product that we sell. And so sometimes it's like, oh, we could create this to sell. I'm like, yeah, we could also just send them an email. And like, we don't need to waste our resources like building a product that we could give away for free.
You win. You win. I think more than anything, I think what's happened with the podcast is I've become very fortunate to have conversations, but really what it is I'm going to business school. And I think that main thing, we're like a third way through this conversation. My main thing is like, I want to be a problem-based company. And I'm really great at coming up with products. And I'm like, no. The better the problem I solve, or the more it's clear, or the highest results, or the fastest, or the cheapest, or the most expensive, depending on if I'm building, what type of brand I'm building, then it's a sure fit.
Yeah.
And I just think that was like the reminder that I needed. Okay, so we're here. We're talking about the decks. We're talking about the conversations. We're talking about being a problem-led company. We're talking about the iterations. We're talking about the growth. But if we go back to 2017 and you're on the island and you're going through a divorce, you're also winning competitions. You're talking about the structure of what needs to change about the journal because it's a holistic best self.
Yeah.
What happened in 2018? And did you kind of sense that there was going to be a departure from your business partner? Where were you at in 2018? Did it hit you out of the blue? What does this look like?
I think, well, he had a kid in 2018, and I think we had hired out any role that he was doing. And I think at the time, honestly, we could have had harder conversations. And that's something I learned about myself, is like a lot of the pain that I put myself through in later business years started because of my inability to like have a hard conversation earlier and like delaying it, which really only makes it harder later. And so that's kind of where we were at. And it took until 2020 for me to be like, okay, this is done. And I wrote a huge article, like what I learned that I would do differently. Like a lot of times you start these business partnerships, and I did 50-50 because I thought it's like, oh, that seems fair. But fair doesn't mean equal. And so whenever you like 50-50 a partnership in the beginning, it's like sometimes it's unfair to one person at the beginning and it evens out, or sometimes it's unfair and it continues to be more unfair as you go on. And I think when you can't have a hard conversation and actually like make a decision, you're actually, you're settling in the beginning of like a partnership because you don't want to have a hard conversation.
Ooh.
And so I think
That's real.
If you really sat down and this doesn't mean that there aren't 50-50 partnerships that work, but I see more that don't work because of insecurity. Like I was super insecure. And so at the time I was like, oh, I don't think I'm worth what I am. And when I look back, I'm like, I totally was. I just didn't, I just like underestimated what I could do. And I also was partnered with someone that was like really charming, like really good talker, very good looking. And so I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And he actually was great at the beginning of the company because he was very good. Like I would kind of show my work and he would talk the work, and together we would make stuff happen. And so even my wife now, I was like, actually, that was a good thing that you had that, because you're not very self-promotional and you needed someone like that in the beginning.
That's beautiful. Okay. Lessons learned, gratitude for the lesson, stuff that you won't repeat again, finding self-worth in that journey. And so the business partner departs, along with him, 50% of...
So he kind of just left the day to day, but then you're like hamstrung with decisions.
Yeah.
And so then it basically was like 2019, we like discussed selling, but then it's like, nobody wanted the business unless I was staying in the business. And so I was like, well, nobody's offering you, like the only offers you're getting is based on me staying and working. And so I was like, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. So I didn't want to go in. And also
good for you.
The people that were coming, I was like, they're giving us this valuation, but it's completely unrealistic. And it's also unrealistic because I can see the type of attitude that they have with the team, and they won't be here any longer because it'll be such a terrible work environment. So like this valuation you're seeing does not exist basically, because, I remember at one point there was some trademark issue and this guy was like, who needs to get fired? Like that was his first response to this like small thing. And I'm like, there was just like red flags where I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And there was a huge haul of other reasons why it didn't make sense. So then it became, okay, maybe we sell the whole thing, but nobody wanted unless I was going to stay. And then
at that point. Like I hired a COO to sort of like work with me. He actually started as a marketing manager and eventually became the COO. And he's the reason why I was able to sell when I did later. But I ended up buying out the business partner, like took on some like personal debt in order to get him out. And that was in 2020. And that negotiation took like 9 months. Wow. He was also going through a really contentious divorce. So what was insane was my 2021 resolution was like less legal bills because you had a personal lawyer, a business lawyer. He had divorce lawyers on both sides.
Got it.
And I actually had to hire a divorce attorney in his state to be able to like manage their divorce. And like I got divorced in 2017. We literally did everything without a lawyer and like stayed on good terms, didn't cost the business a cent. And I paid more in legal fees for his divorce than my own. Yeah.
Oh.
Like I had to hire a divorce attorney in New Jersey to deal with their divorce.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is in 2020.
Yeah.
You buy him out. You take on personal debt to buy him out.
Yeah.
But you're free.
Yeah.
And this is yours. And so what are you feeling? Are you like, I'm building, where's your head at? Are you?
I mean, I'm excited that it's done. I'm like, oh my God, now I can, because it's really difficult. So here's what's happening is 2020 was insane. We have COVID, we have supply chain issues. I also, because there was like issues with the business partner, luckily I had a really good team that like kept things going even when because it's really difficult, right?
Yeah.
You have a team that you have to support, but you're also negotiating a buyout of a company that you don't want to grow too much because then you have to pay them more.
That's right.
But you don't want to have to lay anyone off either.
Right.
So it's you're walking this tightrope of like, I don't want to grow too much or come up with any of my better ideas because I'm gonna have to pay him more. So it's like these incentives are weird. And I dealt with a inventory manager who embezzled from the company. And I found out about it as I was going through all this stuff with my business partner because he was
This is all in 2020?
Yeah. 2020 was like, I don't know if you remember March 2020, everyone's like, oh, you have to like batten up the hatches. Yeah. Business is going to be hard. Like hold your cash. And I'm literally like going through this negotiation. Our factory in China has shut down because of this coronavirus we're hearing about. And then I had just found out about this embezzlement with this guy that I'd worked with. And I'm just like, there's no reserves here. Oh my God. And so then I spent the next 6 months dealing with that. And then it's also like, even though I had a remote team, this guy actually, he had like met my family because he lived in New York too. And I would like bring him to comedy shows. So it wasn't like it was this like random guy I hadn't met. And so I'm like, oh, you were stealing from us the whole time? I actually have a YouTube video where I broke down exactly how he did it because he wasn't like stealing money from my bank account or anything. And it's funny. So I'm actually from Northern Ireland and my brother, I don't come from a business background. Like my family are all like doctors and like have normal jobs. And so I put this video of like this guy like embezzling 230 grand from me. And
oh my God.
I put it up and my brother calls me. He's like, I saw your video. This guy stole all that money from you. God, that's awful. How much money did you make anyway? And I'm like, he didn't steal the money from my bank account. He was essentially like, at the time we would run all of our inventory off spreadsheets and he would sell to bulk order customers and they thought they were paying us, but they were actually paying his like personal Stripe account. And so because we didn't have like good audit systems.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And so how I found out about it is someone was selling against us on Amazon of this like, not even our top product. And I ordered it and I was like, look, there's 3 things that are going on here. This is either a counterfeit product, someone's taking inventory, or our supplier is like screwing us.
Yes.
But I'm like, we've worked with the same supplier for like 6 years and it's all not our main product. So I don't know why they would go for this one.
Okay.
So let's just assume it's either a counterfeit or like someone's stealing inventory. And when I ordered it, it looked exactly like ours. So I'm like, let's just assume like someone's taking inventory from the warehouse. And so I have this guy start to do audits. And he's essentially auditing himself. And then what happened?
Oh my
Nothing was adding up.
God.
And I actually always assume positive intent of like, oh, I just thought he was like negligent. And I fired him for being negligent. And then I got into his email and I realized that he deleted all of his emails for one. Like it was bare. Luckily I was able to recover it. And so my team was like, oh, he's like Stripe invoices and stuff. like PayPal invoices of that he was selling stuff. And then he was going into it was so smart. He was so smart and dumb, and I'll share with you why. So he was going into our 3PL and then going into existing orders, editing all the information of existing order, and then reshipping it so it didn't look like a new shipment. And so whenever I was going into the 3PL and I was like clicking through the order and all the information was different than what is in Shopify. And then I contacted the 3PL. I'm like, who edited these orders? And they told me it was him. And that's when I realized what was going on. He actually did get arrested for it. I work with he was in Denver, and I work with the Denver police because I'm like, he's going to do it to someone else. Yeah. He's clearly a crook. And so I watch enough Dateline. I'm like, I will give you all the evidence. I like
Dateline. Yeah.
I'm like, Dateline meets Shark Tank. I'm like, here.
Yeah.
And so this guy, he was like, you should have become a detective, because I'm giving him all the information. So he really didn't have to do much detective work.
Okay.
And so the guy got arrested, and it came out of the blue because he didn't know I knew about all the stuff. I just never said anything. He just thought he just got fired.
For negligence.
And then 6 months later, a detective calls him and was basically trying to get a comment from him. And then he was like, oh, someone stole my identity. And I'm like, I would love someone to steal my identity and put money into my account.
Right.
Hundreds of thousands.
Right.
And so they ended up arresting him. He spent one night in jail, and then he pleaded to a felony. And now every few months I get what I consider my unofficial 401k, which is small restitution payments. It will never add up to what he stole, but now at least he has it on his record, and he won't be able to do it to someone else.
Okay. So what year is this?
That was in so 2020 is when I discovered. 2021 is when he we did the whole COVID court thing.
Okay. And so then what year do you sell?
2022, October of 2022.
So that's okay. So 2021, that's buttoned up, and you're getting micropayments restitution, which is, hey, it's about people knowing, and it's about him not doing it to somebody else. Okay. And so then what mindset are you in when you're like, I'm open to selling? Or were you approached, or what happened in 2022?
So basically 2021 and 2022, I was just focused on, okay, how do I get this business? I mean, it always had to be profitable, but I'd lost some money in the last year or two because of the embezzlement and the business partner thing. So I'm like, how do I set it up so I could sell it if I wanted? And then I had a baby March of 2022. And I didn't really take any time off after that. I thought I could be one of these people that were like, oh yeah, the baby sleeps and I'll work. Doesn't really work out like that. So I didn't really take much of a break. And then luckily I had a really good COO, and he was running things. But when I came back, when I sort of came back, I was approached by a couple of people. One gave me an offer that I wasn't that excited about. So I'm like, I'm not doing it for this. And then, but what I did was rather than continue down this path, let me just open up other conversations and let it be known that I might sell.
Cool.
And so I was in this Slack group. It was actually a crypto e-com group that I'm in with 40 guys. And I was just like, yeah, I'm thinking of selling. And actually one of those guys put me in touch with the people that ended up buying. And I just at that point was like, I'll say yes to any conversation. So I got on a call with these guys, and I wasn't really taking it that serious. So I was just, sharing what was going on. And then they ended up giving me, I turned on the other offer at this point, and they ended up giving me an offer. And it's funny, whenever you're selling your business, there's so many times when it could fall through at any moment.
Right.
So my wife, the day before it's supposed to close, is it going to close? I'm like, honestly, I have no idea. It's because there's just so much I've heard of literally people signing the documents, waiting for the wire, and the wire never comes, and the buyer literally ghosts after months of due diligence. So I'm not celebrating early or anything. And then I ended up selling then with the goal of okay, now I can take some time off without the pressure of at the time, we have a recession hitting, rates are up. I'm hearing about this looming thing in the future. And I'm like, I just had a baby. I've put so much into this company for years, buying out the business partner. If I just sell, I can breathe, not have things above my head in case shit goes wrong.
Yep.
And then I can figure out what I want to do next. So even though I loved the brand, the company, and the team, I was like, I need a break. And I can see kind of in the future what could happen if I don't take some money off the table. And so that's why I sold.
Amazing. How much of a break did you take?
I took 14. I mean, when I say break, I like tinkering with stuff. So I was like we'd moved into a new house. So I'm like, I literally built an in-ground cold plunge in my yard, like
Oh, I've seen photos of it. Yeah.
So I'm like designing it. I didn't dig the hole. I hired a guy to dig it, but I'm literally like learning plumbing and stuff. And what's funny is when you've, I don't know, been a workaholic, my wife would come home and I'm like lesbian stereotype, Home Depot, like everything. And she's coming home and she's like, oh, how's your day? And I'm learning like electrical and plumbing to like build this thing. So I'm like learning a lot and it's fun, but I'm like, well, nothing I did today made money, so I'm actually useless. And it's, even though I had money, more money than I'd ever had, there's like a scarcity mindset of like, oh my God, it's going to be gone and I don't have any. And God forbid I would just do something for fun that wasn't making money. And so it took me a while to like detach the being productive and making money and like being in a scarcity mindset.
Wow.
During that time off where my wife was like, you could just like, you can take time and like do the projects that you wanted. And like, I was learning to code. And even though I was doing stuff that I liked, it was like, I wasn't happy because I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do next. And like, I have to figure out what my next project is because
like
God
worth
forbid.
and value become intertwined. And all of a sudden when someone's like, you could just be, and you're like, wait, but what value am I bringing? If I don't bring value, then what worth am I creating?
Yeah.
And I think that is a beautiful lesson for us to like stay grounded in you taking a step back to understand, like to undo those two pieces, for you to kind of come back to you. And then you cut to a point where you look back at the business. How are you involved? I mean, was it a complete were you involved any bit at all?
I was like an ambassador.
Okay.
And I was supposed to be on some meetings that they would schedule, but they never scheduled anything.
Okay.
And so I would like send them ideas. I would send emails into the void.
Okay.
And I mean, I totally get it. A lot of times they want the founder out to like craft their own vision or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is fine. There was an earn-out component tied to the sale, which is pretty common, and I still could see like the numbers. And so I'm just concerned about like this earn-out.
Yes.
Because I thought it was a pretty easy goal to hit. And it was, but this company was like a new private equity company. So they were just kind of starting out, but then they were buying brands. And then they kind of like took some autonomy away from the internal people. So like they couldn't approve purchase orders. So then we don't have inventory for Q1 because they hadn't hired a CFO yet to
They're making it really difficult for you to hit your earnout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think they did it on purpose. I just think they like were trying to build the plane as they were flying it and things didn't happen. So I was just like, oh, so that's also a scarcity thing where I'm like, oh, I'm not going to get this earnout. So I have to, that's like a shorter runway than I thought I had. And so I'm just very much like, did not match reality. When I had like way less money, I was like way more optimistic. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
And so then a year in, so I saw they weren't going to hit their earnout. And so I'd mentally like said goodbye to that money. Sorry, I need to go there.
No, please drink your water. I mean, I'm making you talk the whole time because the story is so fascinating.
So where were we? Oh yeah. So basically I took time off. I'm like, okay, let me figure it out. And actually when I sold is I still loved the company and the brand and the products, but I didn't like how I built it because I kind of built my own prison because we grew so fast and had success. It's like, you always have to beat that year after year.
Yes.
Because God forbid, like you would just
flatline or like shrink. I get that.
And then we had a bigger team. So I'm like, oh, people's lives and like kids are dependent on me. And so it's really difficult to like move or shift things whenever you have that risk involved.
Yes.
And so that's another reason I sold, because the new company, we're going to at least keep people on for 6 months.
Good.
And so I was like, okay, they have a bunch of resources that I don't have. Like everyone got a bonus and a raise and I got to leave. And it felt like, okay, now they can like figure out how we go to here next. But so at 6 months, the PE firm told me they were going to let everyone go and move to like more of an agency model. And so my old team members had already told me that. And so I ended up like a few friends who run companies hired some of them. I think one guy who's in Hampton, actually. I think he has like 4 of my old people.
Okay, wait, pause. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a sideline right here.
We can like not mention Hampton.
No. I think it's good. It's good because it'll give you a chance to rest your voice. You could totally hydrate. So, Kat had just mentioned a friend of mine, and then she had mentioned this word Hampton. Now, the reason why Kat and I got connected was because of a gentleman by the name of Sam Parr. Sam is co-founder of Hampton, and it is a CEO executive group, kind of like coaching mastermind type thing. And Sam was in Austin, became very good friends with Kat. And I said, Sam, I'm coming to Austin. I want to connect with amazing people. And he said, you have to connect with Kat. And I started digging into her story. We got connected. I'm watching her iteration and her growth. And now, Sam and Kat are really good friends, like legit good friends. Like he goes in your cold plunge.
Yeah.
Like he makes it inappropriate with like 18 people in your cold plunge. And he's like all about it, right? And so he's just, I didn't mean inappropriate. It's just,
He like
just
babysat
Sam.
my daughter a few times.
Yeah, like they're like homies. So he launches Hampton and he's like, Kat, why don't you get in? And one thing that I really liked about Kat was like she had said, well, at the time, I'm not building anything. And so when I go all in, I go all in. If I'm not building, I'm not gonna be in. And so then she tells me off camera that when I'm gonna get to the part of the story. Anyway, here's like the little ellipse. This is what's foreshadowing. She joins Hampton and I see Kat in Hampton. And I was like, hey girl, hey, let's podcast. Okay. Now when she said her friend was in Hampton, that's the organization we're talking about. And this friend hired 4 of your former team members. And this is y'all just taking care of each other. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, not taking care of, like he needed someone. And I actually only sent him over one person. And then what happened is like that one person hired the other 3 people that they knew from my team.
Good.
Because one of them, one was the only one that stayed during the transition with the PE firm, like after that 6 months. And so whenever they were like, the PE firm, I guess, spoiler, they called me at 12 months in, like actually 14 months post acquisition. We're like, hey, we're shutting down. We're like returning what's money is left to investors, and we're like just going to work on other projects. And at that point, I think they bought 3 brands. So ours was the first and then 2 others. And they were like selling them back either to the owner or to like someone else. And so they're like, do you want to buy it back again? BestSelf. And to be honest, when he first brought it up, I was like, oh, no. Because I'm thinking back to where I was when I sold it, where it was like I had like all this responsibility. But when I like journaled on it and really thought about it, I'm like, oh, how could I do it differently this time? Because I don't have the same like burden that I had before where I like, oh, I have to make this payroll every month. I have to, like we had sales, we had a brand, we had product. There was no team anymore. But I'm like, I'll figure it out. So I ended up like negotiating a really good deal with a private equity firm to get it back. And that was end of January of 2024.
That is so good. Okay, like I would have loved the podcast, period, the end. But the fact that you bought it back, like just like the strategic move of it all. And sure, there's an element of destiny, luck in all of it. But in January 2024, you buy it back. You negotiate a deal that you feel, what are you doing different now? Having looked back at your journey and say, when you were journaling, using your own journal, when you said, how could I do this differently? What did you come up with?
I mean, there's like ChatGPT wasn't out when I sold the business, and I use that all the time. Like there's so much minutia in your day that I'd be caught up and I'd be like hand it off to my CEO or someone else to just handle. Then now I have like a 24/7 assistant.
People, give me an example.
Like,
what would you hand to your COO that you're getting an answer from ChatGPT?
Literally, like, can you write an email? Can you write a letter to deal with this sales tax issue in California? Because I don't want to deal with it. And I literally, like, I will use it for everything. I'm like, here's a letter I got. Can you write a response? Like, this is what's going on. And I'll just talk it into my phone or whatever. And it will just write it out. Take me 10 minutes to fax it and send it. What would happen before is either I would hand it off, or what would actually really happen is I would not do it for months.
Okay.
And then I would pay more tax later.
Okay.
And so that times a million of like forecasting for product, there's just so much minutia that you deal with that you don't even realize you deal with until you don't have to deal with it anymore. And actually my time off, I learned like coding, and I also learned how to use AI for like different things, because I'm like, I'll use it whatever I do next. And now I'm like, okay, I can use it for a lot of things that I used to have to hire people for. And now I do have to hire people, but I've just been, instead of going back to, oh, let me rehire all the same people I had before, the same team, is like, what's the minimum amount I need to get the job done in a way that's like profitable and fun, and I'm not like building my own prison where I have to keep making revenue.
So my mind is freaking blown right now. What was the percentage of decrease? Like when you went back?
It went, so it dropped maybe 25% in revenue. One thing.
Oh, no, not in revenue. Excuse me. Team size. So it's like you come back and you buy the business back. How many team members are there?
0.
So 0.
Like they were like, oh, the P firm's like, oh, do you have a team to help you with the transition? And I'm like, nope, just me.
Okay, so it's just you and you've hired, but when you look at the size of your team now versus what it would have had to have been to sustain the rate of growth now, how much smaller percentage-wise? Is it 50%? Or did you have a 10% team and now you have a 5% team?
I mean, I'm thinking like payroll and like contractors that we used to hire.
Okay.
Let's say it was $1 million a year.
So
it's like
good
a quarter.
Lord. Wow.
So it's just like, how do I, we used to have like this bookkeeping CFO team that like made a bunch of mistakes, but there wasn't really another option. Now you have this thing called Finaloop, which like pulls all your data so you can get like live P&Ls anytime. So I'm like so connected with my profit margin any day of the week. And then just using tools in a smart way, like that alone saves me like $6,000 a month. And you know how many journals you have to sell to pay this? Yeah. Sorry, I shouldn't swear.
No, it's the podcast is all about you. Like it is. Yeah, you do you. This is the podcast for this.
Like, so in when I first started BestSelf, I usually like would equate prices to how many journals I have to sell to make this. So I'm like on the airplane.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to sell like a quarter of a journal to pay for this Wi-Fi. Is it worth it? Can I like sell like at least one journal to make it worthwhile? And now that I have a toddler, I'm like, oh, this is like a month of daycare. So like that's how I'm equating. So I'm, instead of scaling back what I used to spend, I'm like, I set it up as a whole other company. So everything is fresh. So instead of it's like subtracting, it's adding. And one rule I had is like, I'm going to buy this company back, but I'm not putting any more money into it. So everything has to be capitalized through sales, which I still haven't had to put any money into it. I just bought it back and then use the revenue from sales to like do everything else.
So what's next?
I mean, I'm still like stabilizing and like figuring out who it is that I need for my team. But I think what's next is, I mean, I called it BestSelf because I'm really into personal development, and I like, now I have a kid. I'm like, okay, where's that going to take me that I could like build around?
Your next product line, baby.
But I mean, I'm very much into like, okay, what other problems could we solve? But yeah, I love the idea of like, okay, I have the products and the brands back. I don't have this like where I have to do anything, which gives me freedom to like do whatever I want, which I didn't have before. So could I have done it before? Yes, but I also had like a 6-month-old when I sold it before, and I did not have the energy that I needed to like turn the ship. And now I feel like I got a clean slate, and at this point, like everything's gravy.
I knew so many parts of the story, and then I just got to learn a lot of other parts of the story. And I think that wherever people are in their journey, you've been an expander of how to start their business, an expander of how to come back after someone's embezzled, an expander after buying a business partner out and taking on personal debt, an expander of what it looks like to unentangle worth and value and what productivity is when there's just time and rest to grow. And then an expander of what it means to come back, do it on your own terms, and do it entirely differently. And I find that like so beautiful and so inspiring. I can't thank you enough for coming in and sharing this story, because people are hearing it and they're listening and they're saying, there is a piece of her that I now get to carry to change what it is that I'm doing and the approach that I'm taking. So your time on the show has been so valuable, but it has nothing to do with your worth. Ladies and gentlemen, Kat, where can people find you? Where do you like to connect? Where are we pointing
Twitter,
people to?
Instagram, or
Beautiful.
X, whatever we're calling it. My name on X, that's where I like really talk to people.
Okay, good.
Or Instagram, or I also talk about anything I'm doing business wise on littlemight.com, and that's like personal blog. So if you've been following it, you saw the embezzlement stuff, the business partner stuff. As I was going through it, I'm like,
Wow.
one thing is like journaling when you're going through stuff. So with the business partner things, I would be like up all night. And I'm like, I just have to write something down. And this became like a 50-page Google Doc of half of it was useful and half of it was just like, here's why I will never put myself in this situation again. And that actually, I'm like, okay, what could I take from this for like an actual article that could help people? And there's been so many people that reached out who were like, oh my God, your business partner article. I've gone back to it so many times. So yeah, you can learn. I like take my lemonade or take my lemons and I make lemonade. I'm like, here's how not to get embezzled from. Here's how to go into a business partnership. So if you're curious by the behind the scenes of business, it's at littlemite.com. And then products, BestSelf.co, and I'll make a coupon code, Jasmine, so that anyone that wants to buy any of the products that I talk about will get like a 20% discount.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, you guys use the code. I didn't know the code existed. It
doesn't, but it will by the time this is live.
It will definitely exist by the time this show goes live. I don't get anything from it. If you have liked the lemonade that Kat has served you, give yourself a gift. Invest in yourself and see what you can do in 3 months. And in case you're not quite sure how to begin the journaling journey, Kat, her team, her business is more than there to support you. So littlemite.com, bestself.co, Jasmine is the promo code. Connect with her on X, Twitter, or whatever the heck that we're talking about it. Thank you for watching and listening to the Jasmine Star Show. And Kat, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.